Welcome to One Mind Zen. Tonight's Dharma talk is given by Haengdal Chitta.
So Sid was out wandering on one of his quests, and he found himself in a town he was unfamiliar with. And it had been a while since he sat with a Sangha, so he started asking around if there was a Zendo or a Sangha community in the town. And he asked several people, and nobody knew of any Zen or Buddhist groups or Zendo or meditation groups. And finally, one kindly stranger said, "Well, I don't know of a Sangha, but there's a Quaker church right down this road here. And they have service on Wednesday evenings. I've heard they're pretty similar in some ways to Zen. So if you just walk down that road, you'll see the meeting house. It's this little low, simple building." And so I thought, okay, I'm game. I'll try something different. So he walked down the road, and sure enough, it wasn't exactly a Zendo, but there was just this plain little building sitting there in a field, and walked up a couple of steps and inside, and a greeter stood there and said, "Welcome, friend. Sit anywhere." Sid looked around, and there was just these rows of plain seats facing a blank wall, and he thought, must be like Soto. So he went and he picked a seat and he sat down, and other people filed in, and they all sat down, and everybody was just sitting there, and Sid's waiting for this to, get started. I mean, even Soto, they do something, right? Get going, get you in the mood, gear up, He's just sitting there, and he's looking around, and everybody else is just sitting there, and there's no incense or candles. Nobody's saying a prayer or doing anything. And he just sits there for a while. He's trying to be really, polite, and figures maybe they just warm up a lot to this. And finally, he can't stand it, and he leans over to a person next to me and whispers, "Excuse me, I was just wondering, when does the service start?" And his neighbor leans over and says, "When we rise and leave meeting." Sid thought about that for a minute, and he said, "What?" "When we finish and leave, that's when the service starts." Then why are we just sitting here? Is this like a paradox? We sit here and listen. For what? For what we're supposed to do for service. Brother, I don't mean to be weird or sound crazy, but what are you talking about? We listen for guidance, and then when we stand up and leave, we let our lives speak instead of our words. So you don't use a lot of words? George Fox said, "What can you say?" Thank you for your teaching, brother. And after a while, everybody just stood up all at once and they shook hands and they wandered out. And Sid sat there for a minute alone and okay. And he wandered out and walked down the road with a big dumb grin. We talk a lot about not just parroting words, not just memorizing scripture. The name I was given, for whatever reason, Haengdal, supposedly means attain action or realize action. I've accused people of slipping something else in there that they're not telling me, like some kind of great joke, but we'll go with it and assume that actually has something to do with my name. So what's action? In a recent talk, we discussed the famous Bodhidharma episode with the emperor, and that doing action for oneself that's not focused to others attains no merit. And we've talked about some teachings that all too often seem to think that the Dharma means you try to seal yourself up in a little box, one of those little chambers, like where you float in sensory deprivation tank and you commit no negative karma. And so if you sit in your deprivation tank, floating in the water with no negative karma, everything will be better sometime, some birth, some life. But our order says, only don't know and how may I help you? So if we look at the Eightfold Path and has all these virtues, all these right ways, skillful means, and one of them is Sama Kamanta. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Minway, you can, correct me later. But look it up. It basically spells that way. I don't speak Pali. Right action. And 9 times out of 10, if you look up right action from the Noble Eightfold Path, you'll be told all the don'ts. Don't commit this thing. Don't do that thing. Don't do the other. Abstain from this. But is that neutral karma? What if your neighbor needs something? What if right action is not just abstaining but doing? In an age where the poisons, greed, hatred, delusion seem to be taking over, when we kind of wander through our days shaking our heads, saying, wow, I was deluded. I thought maybe our society was past a little bit of this, maybe. Is it just a path of not creating negative karma? Or are we duty bound to do something that is how may I help you? That is right action, skillful means, that by our actions, not our words, not quoting some Buddhist scripture, not quoting some scripture from anywhere, not wandering around just being all zenned out and peaceful, means in our thoughts, in our deeds, in our words, in the way we smile at a stranger, in the way we hold a door, in the way we help someone, in the way we're present to somebody who is suffering, showing true compassion, in the way that we actually evoke that joy at somebody else's good fortune, in a way where our lives and our actions and the way we present ourselves to our neighbors, who probably have no idea what religion we are or anything else in most cases, do those actions speak to what we practice? I think it was Andre, who said, don't be a Buddhist, be a Buddha. So, what are our actions? What should we do? What questions should we ask ourselves when we rise from the cushion and step out into the world like the 10th ox herding picture and walk into the marketplace? And how should we live? And how should our lives speak? And the challenge to me, to everyone is, so what can you say?